He wasn't supposed to stop. Not on a road like this. Not at this hour. Not with the kind of silence that clung to the trees like something waiting to be remembered. The rain came down in thin, slanted lines, tapping against the windshield of Ethan Cole's truck as the wipers dragged back and forth in a tired rhythm. Barely keeping up, the highway stretching empty for miles ahead, two faded yellow lines cutting through darkness and wet asphalt. The kind of road Marines learn to trust and fear all at once, because nothing ever happened here, until it did. Ethan's hand stayed steady on the wheel, knuckles pale under the dashlight, his jaw set the way it had been since he left the service, since the nights stopped being quiet and started echoing with things he couldn't outrun. And for a moment, just a moment, it felt like he might finally pass through this stretch without thinking about any of it, without remembering, without stopping. Then something moved. It wasn't fast, not at first, just a shadow, slipping out from the edge of the tree line, low to the ground, uneven, like it didn't belong to the rhythm of the world around it. And by the time Ethan's eyes caught it fully, it was already there, in the road, in the beam of his headlights, close enough that instinct hit before thought ever could. The brakes screamed against the wet pavement, the truck fishtailing just slightly before coming to a hard, shuddering stop, engine idling, breath caught somewhere between his chest and his throat. For a second, there was nothing. Just rain. Just the ticking of cooling metal. Just the hum of a life that had almost kept going. Then it stepped forward. A German shepherd, female, her coat darkened by rain and something heavier than mud. Ribs faint beneath soaked fur. Ears half lowered not in fear, but in something quieter, something older, her amber eyes catching the light with a steadiness that didn't match the tremor in her legs, and in her mouth, held carefully, deliberately, was something that didn't belong to her. A strip of cloth, dark, worn, familiar. Ethan's breath shifted, slow and sharp, the way it did when memory didn't ask permission before arriving, because he knew that color, that texture, that weight even from a distance, and the part of him that had spent years learning what. To ignore told him to stay in the truck, to let the night keep its secrets, to drive, just drive, because not everything on a road like this was meant to be found. But the dog didn't move away. She didn't bark. She didn't run. She just stood there, rain dripping from her frame, eyes locked on his, holding that piece of cloth like it mattered more than breath itself, like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Ethan exhaled slowly, fingers loosening from the wheel as the silence stretched, heavy but not empty, and somewhere beneath the noise of rain and memory, something else pressed forward, something quieter, harder to ignore. The look in her eyes wasn't fear. It wasn't even pain. It was purpose. And that was the one thing he had never learned how to turn his back on. The engine kept running behind him, a low, steady hum that felt almost like a warning. But Ethan opened the door anyway, boots meeting wet pavement with a dull splash as the cold rain pressed instantly through denim and skin, sharp enough to wake every nerve that had grown quiet over the years. And still the dog did not move, did not retreat, did not flinch as he stepped closer, slow and deliberate, the way he had been trained to approach anything uncertain, anything that might break if handled. Too quickly, his eyes fixed not just on her, but on what she carried. That strip of cloth hanging from her jaw with a care that did not match her condition, like it was not something found but something chosen, protected, carried across distance and time for a reason he had not yet earned the right to understand. And when he was close enough to see the stitching, the faint pattern worn thin by use and weather, something in his chest tightened without permission, a memory pressing forward before. He could stop it because that was not just cloth, it was part of a uniform, standard issue, the kind issued to men like him, the kind that came with names, with stories, with promises that did not always make it home. The dog took one step forward then, just one, her legs trembling under the effort, and gently, almost carefully, she lowered her head and placed the cloth at his feet, not dropping it, not tossing it, but setting it down like it mattered, like it was the only thing she had left to give, and for a second neither of them moved, the rain filling the silence between them, tapping against asphalt, against metal, against memory, until Ethan finally crouched, slow, steady, his hand hovering just above the fabric before touching it, fingers brushing over the damp surface, feeling the weight of it, the reality of it. And when he turned it slightly, enough for the light to catch what had been hidden. Beneath the fold, he saw it, the edge of a tag, dull metal glinting faintly, the kind every Marine wore close to the chest, the kind that carried a name even when everything else was lost. His breath hitched, quiet but sharp, and he did not pick it up right away, because picking it up meant something, meant stepping into something he had spent years trying to leave behind. But the dog watched him, her eyes never leaving his face, not pleading, not demanding, just waiting, as if she already knew the choice he would make, as if she had carried that piece of someone else's story across miles of darkness just to place it here, in front of him, because he was the one who would understand what it meant. Then she turned, not away, not to leave, but to look back toward the tree line, her body shifting just enough to reveal the direction she had come from, ears lifting slightly despite the exhaustion that weighed on her frame. And she took a step, then paused, looking over her shoulder at him again, that same steady gaze, the same quiet certainty, and Ethan felt it then, the pull, the unmistakable sense that whatever this was, it was not finished here on the side of the road, not in the rain, not with a piece of cloth and a name he had not yet read, because somewhere beyond the reach of his headlights, beyond the safety of asphalt and engine noise, there was something waiting, something that had not been found yet. And the only reason he was standing here at all was because this dog had refused to let it stay lost. The rain followed them into the trees, softer now, but heavier somehow, caught in the branches above and falling in uneven drops that tapped against leaves and soaked into the ground beneath their feet, turning every step into a quiet struggle between movement and hesitation. And Ethan did not rush, not because he could not, but because something about the way the dog moved told him this was not a path to be taken lightly. Her pace unsteady yet certain, each step placed with intention, as if she had walked this route more than once, as if she had memorized every route, every dip in the earth, every place where the ground gave way just enough to slow someone who did not belong. He kept a few feet behind her, close enough not to lose sight, far enough not to crowd her, his eyes adjusting to the dimness beneath the canopy where the headlights no longer reached, where the world narrowed to shadows and sound, the distant hum of his truck fading behind him until it was replaced by something else, something quieter, the sound of her breathing, uneven but determined, and the faint clink of metal in his hand where he still held the tag wrapped in cloth, its weight growing, heavier with each step, not in ounces but in meaning. He had not read the name yet. He was not ready to, because names had a way of turning moments into memories and memories into responsibility. And responsibility was something he had spent a long time learning how to survive without. The dog slowed suddenly, her body lowering slightly as she approached a break in the trees where the ground dipped into a shallow clearing. The air shifting there, carrying a different scent, something warmer beneath the rain, something that did not belong to the forest, and Ethan felt it before he saw it. That subtle change that told him they were close to something that mattered, something that had been waiting longer than it should have. She stopped at the edge of the clearing and looked back at him again, not asking, not urging, just making sure he was there, and when their eyes met, there was something in hers that had not been there before, not just purpose now, but urgency, quiet and controlled but unmistakable, and then she turned her head toward the center of the clearing. Ethan stepped forward, slow, careful, the mud pulling slightly at his boots as he moved into the open space, his gaze scanning the ground, the shapes, the shadows, that shifted under rain and darkness, until it settled on something that did not move. At first, it was just a form, partially obscured by branches and the angle of the terrain, something that blended too well into the earth. But as he took another step, and then another, the details began to separate, the outline becoming clearer, the shape resolving into something human, still quiet, not abandoned but not moving either, and the air seemed to hold its breath around it, as if the forest itself understood the weight of what lay there. Ethan stopped a few feet away, the world narrowing again, this time not from darkness but from focus, every sound fading except the rain and the steady, fragile rhythm that he strained to hear, not with his ears alone, but with something deeper, something that had been trained to recognize the thin line between gone and still here. And for a moment that felt longer than it was, he did not move, because stepping closer meant crossing that line, meant confirming what the dog had already known when. She found him, when she chose to leave and carry proof instead of staying, trusting that someone would follow, that someone would understand. Behind him, the dog took one slow step into the clearing, her body lowering further as if the last of her strength had been spent on this final stretch, her eyes fixed on the still figure ahead. And in that silence, heavy and fragile, Ethan finally took the last step forward, kneeling beside the man he had not yet met, but somehow already recognized as one of his own. He does not speak at first, because words feel too small for moments like this, too light to carry the weight of what lies in front of him. So Ethan moves with instinct instead, the kind that had been carved into him long before he ever understood what it meant to carry another life in his hands, his fingers steady as they reach toward the man's neck, searching not for answers but for rhythm, for proof, for that quiet, fragile pulse that separates loss from something still worth fighting for. And when he finds it, faint but present, it is not relief that comes first, but urgency, sharp and immediate, cutting through the fog of memory and hesitation like a command he does not need to. Hear twice. Stay with me, he says under his breath, not loud, not desperate, just firm, the way he was taught, the way you speak when the world is uncertain but your voice cannot be. And his hands move quickly now, checking, adjusting, making sure the man is positioned right, that his breathing has space, that nothing is pressing where it should not. Every motion careful, controlled, built on years of repetition that never truly leave you even after the uniform does. The rain softens around them, or maybe he just stops noticing it, because everything narrows to this small patch of ground, to the rise and fall of a chest that does not quite keep its rhythm, to the silence between breaths that lingers just a second too long each time. And he leans closer, listening, counting without thinking, his own breathing slowing to match, steady, deliberate, as if lending strength through proximity alone. Behind him, the dog lowers herself to the ground with a quiet exhale, her body finally giving in to the exhaustion she had been holding back, but her eyes never leave the man, never drift, never close, as if she understands that this moment is not finished yet, that her job is not done, just because she brought someone here who could help. And Ethan feels it, that silent pressure, not from her, but from something shared between them, something that does not need language to exist. He reaches for his phone with one hand, keeping the other where it needs to be, dialing with practiced efficiency, giving coordinates, voice calm and precise, every word measured, because clarity matters more than speed, because panic has never saved anyone. And when he ends the call, the silence returns, thicker now, filled with waiting. He looks down again at the man's face, rain tracing quiet lines across skin that has seen its own share of sun and dust. And for a moment, there's something familiar there, not recognition exactly, but a resemblance, a shared history written in the way the jaw is set even in stillness, in the way the hands rest, as if they remember holding something heavier than themselves. And Ethan exhales slowly, the sound almost lost in the night. "You are not alone," he says, softer now, not as a command but as a promise, and it is not clear whether he is saying it for the man beneath his hands, or for the dog watching beside him, or for himself. Because in this clearing, under rain and shadow, the lines between them have begun to blur, bound together by something simple and undeniable, the refusal to leave someone behind. Time stretches in a way that feels unfamiliar, no longer measured in minutes or miles, but in breaths, in the quiet rise and fall beneath his hand, in the small, stubborn signs that life is still choosing to stay. And Ethan keeps counting without realizing it, his voice low and steady as he speaks into the silence. Not because he expects a response, but because silence can be heavier than any wound if left alone too long. "You hear me, brother, you stay right here," he murmurs, each word grounded, deliberate, the way he learned to anchor others when everything else was slipping. And the man does not answer, not with words, not with movement, but something shifts, Something almost too small to notice, a breath that comes just a fraction deeper, a pause that shortens, and Ethan catches it the way only someone trained to look for the smallest changes can, holding on to it like proof that this is not over yet. The rain begins to ease, thinning into a soft mist that hangs in the air and settles over them, turning the clearing into something quieter, almost suspended, as if the world beyond the trees has stepped back for a moment, giving this place, this moment, the space it needs to unfold. Behind him, the dog lets out a faint sound, not quite a whine, not quite a breath. And when Ethan glances back, he sees her struggling to stay upright, her body trembling now that the urgency has passed, now that the distance has been crossed and the weight she carried has finally been set down, and there is something in that sight that pulls at him in a different way, a reminder that she has been holding this together far longer than she should have had to, that whatever brought her here did. Not start on the road, but long before it, in hours or days he cannot see. "Easy, girl," he says softly, his voice shifting without effort. The same steadiness, the same calm, just directed differently now, and she watches him, her eyes still clear despite everything, still focused, as if she understands that this part is not hers to control anymore, that she has done what she came to do. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small emergency blanket, the thin material catching the dim light as he unfolds it with one hand, careful not to break contact with the man beneath his other, and he drapes it gently, shielding what warmth he can, creating a barrier against the damp ground and the cooling air, small actions that add up, that matter more than they seem. Because survival is often built on details no one notices until they are gone. The distant sound comes slowly at first, almost blending with the wind, then growing clearer, the low thrum of rotor blades cutting through the night, and Ethan exhales a breath he had not realized he was holding, not relief exactly, but something close enough to stand in its place, because help is coming, because this is no longer just his to carry. He looks down at the cloth still clenched in his hand, at the edge of metal that glints faintly beneath it, and this time he does not hesitate, his fingers shifting to reveal the name etched there, worn but readable, a life reduced to letters that still hold weight, still carry identity, and he reads it once quietly, letting it settle, letting it become real. And when he looks back at the man, at the rise and fall that continues, fragile but present, he nods once, as if acknowledging something. Unseen. "I got you," he says, not loud, not dramatic, just certain, the way promises are meant to be spoken, and beside him, the dog lowers her head to the ground, her eyes finally softening as the sound of the approaching helicopter fills the space above them. Not with urgency now, but with something quieter, something that feels for the first time like an ending that might lead somewhere better. The helicopter does not arrive all at once, but in layers, first as a distant vibration that barely disturbs the air, then as a growing presence that presses down through the trees, scattering loose leaves and bending branches in slow, deliberate arcs. And Ethan feels it before he fully hears it, that shift in the atmosphere that signals transition, that tells him this moment is about to move from his hands into someone else's, and still he does not step back. Not yet, because there is a space between arrival and release where everything matters most. The light cuts through the canopy in fractured beams, sweeping across the clearing in brief flashes that turn shadow into shape and then back again, and voices follow, faint at first, then clearer, calling out, coordinated, practiced, the kind of voices that carry calm even when urgency sits just beneath the surface, and Ethan answers without raising his volume, giving direction, giving location. His tone steady because that is what this moment requires. Not noise, not panic, just clarity. The team moves in quickly, but not chaotically, boots finding ground, hands already reaching for what they need before they fully arrive, and Ethan shifts just enough to make space, guiding rather than leaving, his hand still resting where it has been, maintaining that connection until someone else takes over with the same certainty, the same care, and when they do, he finally leans back, not fully stepping away, but allowing the process to continue without him, watching as practiced movements unfold around the man who now has more than one set of hands fighting for him. For a moment, He just watches, his breath slowing, his shoulders lowering in a way they have not all night. And then something pulls his attention back, something quieter than rotor blades and voices, something closer. The dog. She has not moved far, still lying where she lowered herself, her body curled slightly now, as if the strength that carried her here has finally been spent. And when Ethan turns toward her, he sees it more clearly, the small tremors that run through her frame, the way her breathing has changed, slower, heavier, but still present, still holding on in the same quiet way the man had been moments before. He moves to her without hesitation, crouching down beside her, his movements gentler now, no urgency in them, just care, the kind that does not need to rush, because it understands that this part is different, that this is not about seconds but about presence. "Hey," he says softly, his voice lower than before, almost a whisper now, and her ears flick just slightly at the sound, her eyes lifting to meet his again, that same steady gaze but softer now, no longer carrying the weight of a task. Unfinished, just the quiet awareness of being seen. He reaches out slowly, giving her space even in this closeness, and when his hand finally rests against the side of her neck, her fur damp and warm beneath his fingers, she does not pull away, does not tense. She simply exhales a long, slow breath that seems to release something deeper than fatigue, something closer to relief. Behind them, the voices continue, the coordinated rhythm of a team doing what they were trained to do, lifting, securing, preparing, and Ethan glances back once, just enough to see that the man is being moved, carefully, deliberately, his presence no longer fading into the ground, but rising from it, carried now by more than just will. He turns back to the dog, his hand still resting where it is, and for a moment, everything else fades again, the noise, the movement, the urgency, leaving just this quiet space between two beings who found each other on a road neither was meant to stop on. "You did good," he murmurs, not as praise, not as command, but as truth, and her eyes close just slightly, not fully, just enough to soften, as if she understands not the words but the meaning behind them. And in that small, quiet moment, something shifts in Ethan too, something that had been closed off for longer than he could remember, opening not all at once, but enough to let something in, something that feels a lot like grace. The clearing empties slowly, not all at once, but piece by piece, as the team lifts the stretcher and carries it toward the open gap in the trees where the helicopter waits, its blades still carving the air into something alive and restless. And Ethan stands only when he knows the man is fully in their care, his eyes following the movement until it disappears into the wash of light and motion, until the shape of it is gone, and all that remains is the sound, fading gradually as the aircraft begins to rise, lifting more than just weight from the ground, taking with it the urgency that had filled this space moments before. The wind settles behind it, the branches easing back into place, the clearing returning to stillness as if nothing had happened at all, and yet everything has changed, because there are footprints now, impressions in the mud where decisions were made, where lives crossed in a way they were never meant to forget. Ethan exhales slowly, his breath visible in the cooling air, and for a moment he simply stands there, listening to the quiet that follows, the kind of quiet that does not feel empty but full, layered with what just passed through it. And then he looks down. The dog has not moved far, still where he left her, her body curled slightly into itself, as if conserving what little strength remains. But her breathing is steadier now, less strained, more even, and when his boots press softly into the damp ground beside her, her ears twitch again, just enough to show she is still present, still aware. He crouches beside her once more, slower this time, without urgency, and the space between them feels different now, no longer defined by what needs to be done, but by what has already been given. He studies her more closely in the dim light, the lines of her frame, the places where her fur has thinned or clumped from weather and time, the quiet resilience written in her posture even in rest, and there is something about it that settles deeper than anything he has felt in a long while, something that does not demand or question, just exists. He reaches out again, his hand finding the same place along her neck, and this time when his fingers move gently through the damp fur, she leans into it just slightly, not fully, Not with strength, but enough to show trust, enough to show that whatever distance she had carried before has finally closed. "You are coming with me," he says quietly, not as a decision he needs to weigh, but as something already decided, already set the moment she stepped into his headlights. And though she does not respond in any way that could be called an answer, her breathing shifts again, a small change, but noticeable, as if the weight she carried has shifted from her shoulders to his without resistance. Ethan glances once more toward the place where the helicopter had been, now empty sky above it, and then back to her, and he slips one arm carefully beneath her, the other supporting her weight with practiced ease, lifting her slowly, mindful of every movement, every sign, because even now, when the hardest part is over, care still matters. She does not struggle, does not tense. She simply rests against him, her head settling lightly against his chest, her breath warm even through the damp fabric of his jacket. And for a brief second, he closes his eyes, not out of exhaustion, but out of something quieter, something that feels like recognition, like the moment when a mission ends and something else begins, something you did not plan for, but know you cannot walk away from. He stands with her held securely, the clearing behind him, the path ahead unclear, but no longer empty. And as he turns back toward the road, toward the life he thought he understood, the silence follows him, not as a burden, but as something softer now, something that carries with it the faint, steady rhythm of a second chance. The road feels different on the way back, not because it has changed, but because he has the same stretch of wet asphalt now, carrying a weight it did not hold before, the headlights cutting through mist that has begun to settle low over the ground, and Ethan drives slower than he needs to, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting lightly against the seat where she lies, wrapped in a spare jacket, her breathing quiet but present, each rise and fall a small, steady reminder that not everything fragile breaks. The truck's interior holds a different kind of silence now, not empty, not distant, but shared, filled with the soft rhythm of movement and breath, and something unspoken that lingers between them, something that does not need to be named to exist. He glances at her every few seconds, not out of worry alone, but out of something closer to awareness, as if part of him is still catching up to the fact that she is here, that she followed him out of the darkness and into this narrow space where lives overlap in ways that are not planned but somehow feel inevitable. Her eyes open briefly, just enough to find him, just enough to confirm that he is still there, and when they meet there's no urgency left in them, no demand, just a quiet presence that settles into the space between one heartbeat and the next. And then they close again, her body relaxing further into the fabric beneath her, trusting, without needing proof. The windshield fogs slightly at the edges, the heater working against the cold that seeps in from outside, and the faint smell of rain and damp earth lingers in the air, mixed now with something warmer, something alive, and Ethan breathes it in without thinking, the scent grounding him in a way that feels unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. The town lights appear slowly in the distance, soft at first, then clearer, small clusters of yellow and white breaking through the dark like quiet promises, and he knows where he's going before he fully decides it, the route unfolding from memory rather than intention, past closed storefronts and quiet intersections, until the low glow of a 24-hour veterinary clinic comes into view, its sign flickering slightly but steady enough to be seen. He pulls into the gravel lot, the tires crunching softly as the truck comes to a stop, and for a moment he does not move, his hand still resting near her, the engine idling beneath them, the world outside waiting but not pressing. And in that pause, something settles into place, something simple and clear. He reaches over and gently adjusts the jacket around her, making sure she is covered, making sure the warmth stays where it is needed. And when he slides his arm beneath her once more, lifting her carefully, she stirs just enough to lean into him again, her head finding that same place against his chest, as if it has already learned the shape of it. "We are almost there," he says quietly, not as reassurance alone, but as a promise he intends to keep. And as he steps out into the cool night air, carrying her toward the lighted doorway, the distance between who he was before this night and who he is becoming feels smaller than it has in years, measured not in miles or time, but in the quiet, steady choice to keep going, to keep holding on, even when the road does not ask him to. The clinic door opens with a soft chime that feels louder than it should in the quiet of the night, a small sound that marks the shift from uncertainty into something steadier, something that hums with light and quiet purpose. And Ethan steps inside without hesitation, the warmth meeting him immediately, wrapping around damp clothes and tired bones, carrying with it the faint scent of antiseptic and clean linen, the kind of place where things are mended without needing to be explained. A woman at the front desk looks up, her expression changing in an instant from routine to recognition, not of who he is, but of what he carries, and she's already moving before he reaches the counter, her voice calm, practiced, asking just enough to understand, not more, and Ethan answers in the same tone, simple, direct, because there is no need for anything else. They take her gently, hands careful, movements precise but not rushed, and for a moment he hesitates as her weight leaves his arms, a brief pause where something in him resists the separation, not out of fear, but out of something closer to connection, something that has formed quietly and without permission, and then she is placed on the table, wrapped, examined, cared for, and he steps back just enough to give them space while never quite leaving. He watches the rise and fall of her chest, the small adjustments, the quiet reassurances spoken in soft voices that carry more meaning than volume. And slowly, steadily, her breathing evens, her body settling in a rest that is no longer forced but allowed. And Ethan exhales again, deeper this time, the kind of breath that reaches places he had forgotten how to access. The hours pass without being counted, measured instead in small changes, in the way her ears twitch when someone speaks, in the way her eyes open longer each time, clearer now, no longer clouded by urgency, but steady, present. And when they finally bring her back out, wrapped in a clean blanket, resting but awake, she looks for him first, not the room, not the lights, just him. And when she finds him, there is something in that look that settles everything that came before, something that does. Not ask what happens next, because it already knows. He steps closer, slower now, his hand reaching out in the same careful way. And when his fingers touch her again, she leans into it just enough, her breath steady, her eyes soft, and for a moment the room fades, the quiet hum of machines, the distant voices, all of it slipping into the background, leaving only this simple exchange, this silent agreement that whatever brought them here does not end here. Ethan reaches into his pocket then, pulling out the cloth and the tag he has carried since the road, turning it once more in his hand, the name catching the light again, no longer just a mystery, but a connection that still stretches beyond this room. And he looks at her, at the way she watches him, and he understands something without needing it explained, that she did not just lead him to a man, she led him back to something he thought he had lost, something that does not fade with time or distance. He closes his hand around the tag, gently, not hiding it, just holding it. And when he looks up again, his gaze steadier than it has been in years, there is no question left in it, only direction, quiet and certain. He stays beside her as the night gives way to early morning light that filters through the windows in soft lines, turning everything a little warmer, a little clearer. And when she finally rests fully, her breathing slow and even, her body no longer fighting, he sits there in the stillness, not thinking about where he was going before, not wondering what comes next, just present, just here, with a life that crossed his path in the dark and chose to trust him with what it carried. And in that quiet, he understands something simple and lasting, that some roads are not meant to be driven through. Some are meant to be stopped on, because sometimes what waits in the dark is not something to fear, but something that was always meant to be found. On a rain-soaked road in the middle of nowhere, a U.S. Marine finds himself pulled into a moment he was never meant to face again, when an abused German shepherd steps out of the darkness, carrying something that changes everything, leading him off the asphalt and into the unknown, where another fallen Marine waits between life and silence. This cinematic journey unfolds as one of the most powerful animal stories, where loyalty is not spoken but proven through action, where a wounded dog refuses to give up on the life she guards, and where a soldier is reminded that some missions never truly end. As the U.S. Marine follows the dog through the forest, guided only by instinct and trust, he discovers that what she carries is more than a clue. It is a calling, one that forces him to confront the part of himself he tried to leave behind, making this one of those unforgettable animal stories that blend human courage with the quiet strength of a loyal companion. Through cold nights, fragile breaths, and the sound of rescue cutting through the dark, the bond between the Marine and the German Shepherd becomes something deeper, something that speaks to the heart of all animal stories, where survival is shared and hope is carried on. For Legs, when the danger fades and the silence returns, what remains is not just a rescue, but a transformation, as the U.S. Marine chooses not to walk away, and the German Shepherd finally allows herself to rest, creating a moment that defines the soul of true animal stories, where healing does not come in words, but in presence, in trust, in the decision to stay. This story stands as a reminder that among all animal stories, the ones that stay with us are not about strength alone, but about the quiet miracles that happen when one life refuses to abandon another, even in the darkest places.